take a screenshot. Let's talk.
If you're not used to being able to maintain balance in that situation, then the nail clips are never going to work. Right. So I really like that, looking at the small detail.
Yeah, and catastrophic things can happen to kill your relationship if you try to push it, because that's what you want. And,
exactly.
Well, or not even that, but you didn't see it.
Yeah.
Right. Had you been able to see it, you would have stopped.
Yeah.
But you didn't know.
And that relationships.
Mm-hmm. So in the segue, we were talking about if you don't see it, which is the observation that we talked about in the last one.
Yes.
Right. So now you do see it. Now what? To keep that relationship.
What do you mean by there's a lot of times we use the word relationship, and it's used a lot of places, books, TV shows. I feel we should just explore it for a few minutes about what we could, or just provide some kind of meat to it. So do you have anything that you think of when you think of relationships?
Yeah, differences. Right? Everybody wants a different relationship. My husband's going to have a different relationship with Penny or the cat than I have, than you have, than the neighbor girl who takes care of him when I leave, and my daughter who comes over to visit, and her husband, right? Everybody she meets is going to have a different relationship. And we have to understand that first. First, I think.
That's really interesting, because I wouldn't have gone there, but I was like, that's no, in a good way, because it's opened up my thinking to go, that's really interesting, because actually that's very true. Everyone does have a different relationship, and sometimes when we're working with people, whether it's teaching someone with their dog, like I've been working with Penny, and then you work with Penny, and then when you've been working with noticing some differences, and how much of an impact does that relationship have on terms of the human learner, their motivation, and also for the dog. And so really important to understand that actually, and even with a client, I could say to them, it's okay, because you have a different relationship that you have to your wife, that your brother might have, or someone else might have, or friends, different friends, different relationships. So it's okay for your dog or your cat or your human to behave differently with different people, and doesn't mean one relationship's worse or better,
right.
But they could be just as strong, but just different.
Right.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
The other thing for me, I think about relationships is from like an operant perspective, a behaviour perspective. I think, how can I talk about it from an ABC perspective? And where I've got to at the moment is thinking, so the positive reinforcers are important in terms of, by that I don't mean people giving you stuff, but I mean for whatever it is, there's something that's reinforcing your behaviour being with that person. But equally, in terms of good things happen when that person's around, you enjoy things, and then there's also the process of reinforcement. The process of escape and avoidance and being able to access that and having predictability and control, I think is so important for a relationship too.
Mm-hmm. And by escape and avoidance,
I mean being able to go, no thank you, or I don't want to do that, and what does the other person do? So if I just met you and I don't know, we went to do something, we were at a theme park, and you're like, oh, let's go on this ride, and either I said no thank you verbally, or I said I just was silent, or you saw me, depending on how like we talked about observation, so yeah. What kind of observations do you make? Did you see the whispers, or are you looking for the talking or shouting or screaming? I often say if you listen to the whispers, the animal has no reason, the learner has no reason to shout and scream.
Right.
And you're really good at that, talking about looking at, okay, a person's gone silent, there's changes in how they're turning away. So if you noticed that and you said, oh, actually, Chirag, do you mind holding on to my bag if you want, and I'll go on the ride and I'll meet you back in a minute, or do you want to go on another ride and we'll catch up in 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Suddenly I go, oh, and for me, I think that's increased our relationship really quickly, because the quality of interaction there was really high in terms of I feel safe, there's predictability, whereas you could have equally gone in that situation and said, it's okay, come on, let's go. And I already said no.
Or are you serious? Even one step further.
Exactly.
Are you serious? Are you going to be that guy who doesn't go on the rides? Oh, for crying out loud.
Yeah, and how does that make me feel? And also, how does that affect our relationship? And so, for me, that's where, again, if I'm starting to work with and it brings it back to a training session, is if I'm starting to work with a learner, it's not just about, here, I'm going to give you treats, I can give you Cheerios, I can give you food, or I can give you praise, say, good boy, well done. But it's also about what you talk about a lot as well, is looking for those, does a person turn away? Do they hold their breath? Do they just go silent? Do they stop nodding their head? Or do they start to nod their head? And starting to go, one sec, could they be whispers? And if I respect the whispers, suddenly the learner has no need to shout and scream, but also that might mean the learner turns away for a second. Or for example, with Penny, we're training in here, and there's a door behind where I'm training. Sometimes in a training session she looks at a door, so what I do is I open the door. And in the beginning she used to walk out in the hallway. She used to be there for a minute, I just sit there, she'd come back. When she came back, she was fully focused towards the food and me, as opposed to the door. And then later, if she heard something, she looked, opened it, she's like, I'm back with you, don't need to go out there. And for me, I believe that creates stronger relationships and trust, what we call trust, predictability, and actually empowers the learner, gives them control. And so when we talk about relationships, I think it's such an important component. It's not just, I can give you treats, animal, or learner, listen to me because I've got stuff I want to give you. Yeah. But actually going, if the learner's taken a moment to pick their nose or just turn away or just go on their Game Boy, maybe that's a time they're asking for silence. And if I take the pressure off and I just turn away and go on my phone or something, and when they turn, they lift their head up and they go, so what are we doing today? What's the time? That's given me a window. Now in that window, if I make the most of it and I go, okay, I can talk, or we can do something, keep it short, but keep it sweet. And it's just a voice. You just move that so there's a vibration.
I'm so sorry.
Okay. So if we keep that short and sweet, the interaction, the learner then wants to lift their head back up and engage with us. Whereas I think sometimes we're so forceful in a non-forceful way, if that makes sense. I've got treats. I want to train my dog with treats. My dog walks in the room and is sniffing the bed or is scratching themselves. I go, look, I've got treats. I do a hand touch, and I think of that as being nice and kind and using positive reinforcement. But hold on a second, if that behaviour is functioning to go, I just need a moment, I just need to consolidate myself, I need to go away from you, I just need silence, and I take that away from the learner, that's going to start to take away that trust.
Yeah. I think safety,
yes,
the other side of trust, right, is the most important thing. If I feel safe,
yeah,
my animal feels safe,
yeah, then
we will trust, and we will allow more things that we may have not in the beginning. So you may actually expand your ability to do those by
yes,
giving trust. But to flip on the other side of that,
okay,
since we're taking time to discuss
yeah,
it, there are times when we can't do that or shouldn't do that, and one of the things that I gauge that on is, what is the risk, right? What is the risk when I'm working with humans, Penny? With humans, not only is there a physical risk, but sometimes there's a financial or fiduciary risk that we have to be careful of. If they don't do this, they'll lose their job. If they don't learn this skill, they won't get a promotion.
mm-hmm,
And so then we have to start balancing how much freedom we allow and how much perfection in what they want with what do they have to get, or what do we assume they have to get, or what have they told us they have to get. So it's an interesting balance in real life, I think, to go, in a perfect world, A,
yes,
in a less than perfect world, B, in a crappy world, C, and then we just shouldn't, no matter
yeah,
what. So the other day, Brian came home, Penny ran, and she was behind, and then
yeah,
she ran in front, and I didn't think
yeah,
he could see them in the truck. So I yelled. I yelled, and it was a forceful, it was meant to be the most salient noise in the environment. So it's funny that when we say that safety thing is that wide range. Yeah?
True.
Yeah.
I agree with you, yeah, because you say safety, you think about actually has to be real, it has to be realistic, it has to be usable in everyday life. And in this example with Prince Harry, and you can just see the screenshot of his face and him lifting his paw. Yeah, one thing that made me think about when you said that was, sometimes a learner does need to get to work, or they do need to do something, or they need that promotion, and if we don't set the environment up so they're able to access that behaviour and that reinforcement, nothing's ever going to change. So, and sometimes you don't have time to take it that slow, and so in this situation I could have broken it down to really small components, but almost we sat there and I used some food so Harry would lift his paw up, but wouldn't describe it as completely comfortable. but I wouldn't say the risk was he was uncomfortable in a major, like it wasn't massively uncomfortable, but it wasn't completely like I could have done it so that it was even less stressful for him. And when I say stressful, it wasn't stressing him out in a negative way, but what we did was he started to lift his paw up and he was like, shall I? But every time his paw came up and lots of food was happening, hopefully the food was functioning to reinforce that behaviour. And in the next session, what we're going to see is he's going to lift his paw up, and that behaviour is going to be there because of all the reinforcement that happened previously. And if we hadn't had that little bit of a push, then he would never have got there. The behaviour had never occurred, and be able to contact that reinforcement contingency.
I'm not sure there's any learning that doesn't come with a modicum of stepping outside of what you already know. We'd all just be laying in our beds,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So with humans, sometimes it makes it worthwhile. We're like, oh, I overcame. I climbed the mountain. We just need to watch how tall that mountain is.
True. Because
sorry.
Go on.
But to your original point is, I don't think we see that what you were first started talking about, and we don't practice that enough. How can we make this better? Can we allow them to look outside? Can we allow? We some of us have learned to be more strict. So I think your point is really well taken. That's something we should practice. Are we listening to them? Are we listening? Can we make it enjoyable as much as possible?
And something I got from what you said there as well was the idea that it changes over time. And it made me think about, there are friends that I have who like my best friends are the people I'm really close with, and I know them for years. We've got a strong over time reinforcement history, and they could do something that someone else could do who might be new. And if that someone who knew did it, I would find it highly irritating, and almost like, well, I don't really want to spend more time with that person. Whereas one of my friends did it, I just brush it off. Now, if that happens consistently enough and over long term, your friendship might diminish a little bit. Maybe
that's your friend because they've learned not to push or not to go there. So that's why they are your friend.
Exactly. And it's like, if we build strong relationships from what we've talked about, then there are times where you have to say, no, stop it, or we can't do that, and there's a safety risk or whatever. I don't think that's the end of the world, and you brush it off. And it's like, you don't love your friend any less, you don't hate them any less, you actually appreciate them for helping you, saving you, or going, do you know, the fact you helped me get on that roller coaster, I really appreciate it. Now I've been on one, I want to go on more.
Yes.
But I needed the right person to do that. If it was some stranger that I met, or maybe that stranger would have been the right person, but like, for that person, for that individual, for that behaviour, what's that right relationship they need? And then sometimes it might be that person they need to know for 10 years who says something, but someone they've known for 4 minutes wouldn't be able to say the same thing and get the same effect. So I think that's really powerful as well.
To your original point, if you trust them, you may allow yourself to be pushed. Okay, I trust you. I think I've said that to you a couple times since you've been there. We're going to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, I trust you. So to your point, if you have that trust and that relationship to begin with, then maybe you actually like being pushed a little more, and it's okay. So
that's really interesting. Yeah. So I thought that's fascinating. Should we see what else we're going and talking about? Of watching things back like this, like we're doing, and having an independent eye, someone who is different to the person that's doing the training, and seeing what they see, or hearing what they see, because I may see something different, I may not see certain things that you see. So actually sitting here watching this together is really beneficial, because we'll get to see new things for each other.
Perfect.
I know, I was like, you see, I see, they see, you see, she see. I was like, everyone's seeing stuff.
Observation is apparently important to us.
Exactly. And we talked about observation in the last session. I don't really talk too much about it now, but just don't take away from that observation. I think training, equally important part of training, and actually physically doing something with the learner, is observing. Just before you go into a session, baseline, what happens during the session, after you finish the session, can I watch back like we're doing now, and what can I change? Observation, I think, is so key. Go back and watch the previous episode to see what we thought about observations, or how we would teach observations. So let's see what we have.
See you again.
So there, his foot has touched my hand, and so I'm paying, and I want to reinforce as much as possible within that position. So that
now he took his hand off.
Yep. So then I'm going to arrange the environment to promote foot on hand behaviour, and I'm doing that by holding the food in a certain position. So when I say arranging the environment, like I said, for me, I was taking food, holding it out away from him. He was leaning forward to stretch to get the food, and as he was doing that, the puzzle box is there as well, and that created a step. So that helped me start getting his foot to come up. I set the environment so he could lift his foot, and as I saw that lift, I could pay that. And so he goes, oh, foot lift, I get paid for.
Yeah. And again, even in the physical stance, you were, by putting this foot down and having to shift, all my weight's up here, and so it's easier to do this.
Yes.
Very good.
And also, I don't know if you see it, but when his foot does come on my hand is steady but flexible, if that makes sense. What I mean by that is steady, so if the foot comes up, it's not dropping.
Yeah.
Because the animal would know who would want to sit on an unstable branch.
No trust there.
So the stability, but there's also watching the animal. So when you're watching Harry and he lifts his foot and he's like, oh, balance, I'm adjusting my hand, because if I kept my hand here, he'd have to do all the balancing. Whereas what I'm doing is trying to help with the balance at the moment by, as he's balancing, I'm adjusting my hand so that his foot is pushing and going, oh, I've got better balance. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Interesting. No, I didn't see that.
Stick with the food, and as his foot comes forward or touches my hand, I'm paying.
Or there.
So
I don't know if you noticed that. So what happened was I took my hand forward, both my hands, flat hand and hand.
Mm-hmm.
What did he do? Did you notice? He turned and sniffed the bed.
Oh no! I wonder if we can go back.
You. There. So that's
To promote foot on hand behaviour, and I'm doing that.
Turn the volume off. So I get ready. He looks in this direction. That cues me to put my hand up and this up. But when I do that, he turns away. He's looking away. So I take my hand away for a second. And then as soon as his head comes forward, I represent my hand forward in the food.
Okay.
The reason I was doing that is what we were just talking about before, a moment ago, is listen to the whispers. So for me, the learner engaged. They looked up. I started to converse. The learner started to go, whoa, whoa, whoa. And as he turned his head away, to me, if there was any pressure, I didn't want pressure, I just took a little step back, took that hand away. Well, not completely, I just moved it away. That allowed him, or his behaviour then was, I'm ready, and then I moved my hand forward, and we engaged. And so that fits in what we were just talking about a moment ago.
Yeah, little micro observations that turn into actions, that
Yes.
turn into observation, that turns into actions. Yeah.
I like that, actions and micro observations and the whole relationship there.
both.
I was saying both.
Yeah.
Sometimes I was just feeding, so if the behaviour was just I was just feeding the whole time. Sometimes if I saw the moment the foot came up and hit my hand, I clicked with my mouth like, and or say good and give the treat.
Wait, what?
So
Are you saying you can say good, click, just feed? What?
whoa, you've opened up a whole box, Sad, I think.
And let's preface this with you.
Me.
Yes, just in case
How
anybody else does
about-
it differently.
We take a break because we start the next episode with that discussion.
That's a whole box of
A whole box of chat, talk. Yes. We'll see you guys next time.